Hi, and welcome back to Politidoxy. I'm your host, Dan Friedman. Today we have a guest. She has asked to stay anonymous, and hence you can see there's only video on my side, but the audio will be perfectly clear and correct, and I hope everybody enjoys this. So the reason why I brought up this guest is because she's anti-feminist turned housewife. Now that's a story if I ever heard one. And former atheist. Now, former atheist, feminist, turned saved by the grace of God, and a mother of three. So this is one amazing thing, because when it comes to feminism, I've been reliably informed this is something that empowers women, makes women much more happier, and this is somebody who has rejected the notion, rejected all of that, and now taking on this more traditional role. And from what I've seen on Twitter, I mean, I really like what she has to say. So I thought, why not bring her on? So here we have her. Her name is Tanya, and I would like for you to first acquaint yourself with the audience. So go ahead and introduce yourself on your own terms.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. Like you said, my name is Tanya. For the vast majority of my life, I grew up non-Christian, non-believer, very much. I never knew it was feminism, but grew up with all those ideals. My mom was very much the embodiment of a feminist, and I grew up not a Christian, and then and very much a liberal, very much on the left of the political side. And then my life completely changed once I met my husband and once I got saved. And when I finally started realizing how bad feminism was and how deceived I had been, I decided, well, I should use my story and what I know to warn other women so they don't make the same mistakes I did and have a chance to, and if they do, have a chance to remedy their mistakes earlier than I did. So basically, that's very quickly my story.
All right, so let's get more into this. So you say that for a long time you've been indoctrinated into the feminist ideology. Was that a thing that was a must to learn within your household, or was it something that came naturally and you were naturally indoctrinated? Was it more of a forceful, like you have to believe in this because otherwise you might end up uh, very very upset and alone, and so the lies of the feminist movement? Or was it more of, mom is like this. Oh, mom is preaching these kinds of things. You know what? These sound like good ideas. Was it more forceful, or was it more of a you have to believe in this because otherwise you'll be sad?
Right, that's a good question. It was a little bit of both. I mean, there I was told a lot, like, I was told a lot of the stuff like you can't depend on the man, especially because of how my grandma was like my mom's mom and her marriage, and she was always like it was very difficult marriage, and um my mom was always like, you can't depend on a man, you always have to have money on the side or a career on the side or a job on the side. And my other grandma had never worked a day in her life. My grandpa always worked extremely hard and he wanted her to stay home, and she was absolutely miserable about it and always spoke badly about it, about how I shouldn't do that and how I should get a job, get a career, not get married young, not have children young, and be promiscuous, all those things. So it was kind of both, like, you need to do these things so you don't end up miserable because traditional values will lead you to misery. But I never noticed that it was hardcore until I was presented with the other side of things, like, oh, there's this is the truth, because they had always presented it as the opposite. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So you say that you have changed, you have moved on from that point of life, and now you found happiness, and you've been saved by the grace of God. So here's the question: Was it what came first? Meeting your husband, and he turned you towards God, turned you against feminism, or was it first you found God and then also you found your husband and then turned again against feminism? What was the first point of turning?
Okay, so when we first met, my husband and I was fairly young. I was 22, and when we met, we were both atheists. The only difference was that he was a conservative and I was not. I was very much a liberal. And when we met, he changed that. Obviously, I liked him, and I was like, "Why is this man a conservative? He'd be perfect if he was a liberal." But I still liked him, and so we dated. And slowly but surely, he questioned my beliefs and my thoughts. And I, of course, did not have an answer because most of like the political left is all about your feelings and not very much about facts. And so my worldview started to crumble because I didn't have any facts or arguments for my stances. Um, and so as soon when I became a conservative, then I think my feminist like worldviews really started to change only when I became a Christian, because even as a conservative, you'll see in the conservative movement, the feminism is very much still in very much alive in that. So only when I became a Christian and I started to understand what does the Bible prescribe? What are patriarchal worldviews? What does it mean? Is when I fully started to realize how feminism was so evil and how it's the exact opposite of that. And that's when I started to realize these things. Because until then, I mean, I knew feminism wasn't good, but I hadn't fully realized or had really sat down to really understand why. Because right before I met my husband, funny enough, I was watching YouTube at the time. What was it, 2016, 2017? I don't know if you remember. They had a bunch of like street interviews with like feminists getting owned and things like that. I don't know if you remember that. Like it was really popular at the time. And these guys would just ask these feminists these very basic questions that they couldn't account for or give answers to, like, what rights do men have that women don't? And I was like, wait, I hadn't thought about that. This is just a thing people say, that women have less rights, but what are they exactly? So it started way back then, but it didn't fully end, and then I didn't fully understand it until I gave my life to Jesus Christ and I understood the truth, because that's only when you can truly grasp the truth and see the lies.
So the first turning point came first meeting your husband, giving your
Yes.
stability in life, which this is the man's job to give the woman stability. And this is something, by the way, something that I've said myself about. I want couples, men and women, to be independent of government, but dependent upon each other. That is the only way this goes. And it's a very important point. Most I've seen the red pill movement, they would probably reject such a notion. And the red pill movement, they are correct in a lot of the issues, but their prescription to the problems are highly lackluster. So I find and especially since they reject the idea of marriage altogether, although
Yes.
they're not rejecting it in a sense that they say nobody should get married, but they're like, yeah, marriage is so broken that you shouldn't get married only because it could destroy you. And I'm like, yes, it can destroy you, but that does not mean you don't get married. It means that you stop looking for women at the bar or at, I don't know,
Right.
at night at the clubs. You look for women in church. That's where you should look for women, and you would find. And I'm telling you, you would probably find a much more high quality woman, which would lead to a very successful and happy marriage. So that we'll get into the red pill movement a little later, but. So you found him, you found the man, he gave you stability. And from there, at that point on, that was like the turning point where, okay, so now you have stability. Now you can question all these kinds of things. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, he's more conservative. Why does he have these kinds of point of views? Let me probe into this more. And then you found God. So that is awesome. First of all, that is awesome, because we need more of God. That's what one thing we need more. We need more masculinity, real masculinity. And this is on the subject of toxic masculinity. I think you'll love this, because I reject the idea of toxic masculinity
I
at,
agree.
at all. But I would say, if there ever was such a form of toxic masculinity, give me a minute. I think what I said was this, that the only real form of toxic masculinity would be for a man to convince a woman to sleep with him, and then when the child inevitably is starting to develop, convince her to kill the child and tell her that it's okay, it's fine. Now that is a form of that's something that I would actually call toxic masculinity. But more than that, I think the idea of toxic masculinity came from some kind of study, or yeah, I think it was a study, the 1990s, and it had it was specific to prisons, that how things escalated in prisons real quickly, and they said that that is a form of toxic masculinity. So it was specific to one thing, and now it has ballooned to this. Oh, you don't like your man smokes a cigar? That must be toxic masculinity. He talks to you this in such a way, that's toxic masculinity. He looks at you at the gym, toxic masculinity. I'm like, no, that is a specific thing. You've perverted the entire idea of what it actually means. So anyway, so you've turned to God. As I said, we need more of that. And by turning to God, you found that, wait a minute, all the ideas of feminism, all the ideas that they have constantly put into my mind that'll make me happy, all of it is a lie. All of it. I reject. And by the way, this is something that you mentioned, that feminism is very much still alive in the conservative movement. That's why I reject every wave of feminism, from the worst, from the first till the last. Every single one is just a form of leftism. None of them. Now, some of them you might say, well, some of them had redeeming qualities. I'm like, that doesn't matter, because you could have redeeming qualities, but the overall movement never was really about making women happier. You could just look at the statistics. I don't have the statistics right here, but my viewers could just look this up. You can look up when women were happier, when all the misogyny was going on. That's when women were happier. Now, when I'm calling for misogyny, obviously, I don't want misogyny. I don't want hatred towards the sexes. Again, I've said I want dependence on the sexes. One depends on the other. But when this supposed misogyny was happening, that's when women were happier. Wait a minute, that's a contradiction. No, that doesn't make any sense. Well, because women were more stable, men were more stable. They actually had purpose. Take away purpose from both sexes, and everybody gets upset. Everybody gets miserable, and they just stare into the void all day. And when I say the void, I mean TikTok and Instagram. Those two are voids. So I want to ask you more about this. So you reject all about this. You reject the feminist ideas. What kind of ideas went into conflict? What ideas specific was in conflict with your idea of Christianity?
Oh, that's a good question. It's just the basics of like women can have sex like men, which they can't. That a woman can't depend or shouldn't depend or trust in a man, which they should and they can. That there was something inherently less good or less productive or less inspiring about just being a wife and a homemaker, which is not true. That was one of the beliefs that I held to the longest, was that I needed a career and I needed to work and I needed to have a job in order to be productive. That, just being at home, just being a mom wasn't enough, which is a lie. God clearly has a design purpose for women, and that is to be homemakers, to be keepers at home, to keep their home, their children. Not saying that women can't have things on the side, obviously, but that's a different conversation. But that is one of the main ones that I held on to the longest. And trying to think what else. Or that that like submission meant that women were less than men. That's not what it means. People, like, my children submit to my authority and my husband's authority. That doesn't mean they are less than me. They are no less than me or my husband. They have the same value. They have the same value as human, as a person, as anything. And that also was a direct contradiction to the word of God. And that's all I can think about right now.
On the submission part, that is one of the most important things to talk about, because what most people think of, oh, you're submitting, so that means you're lesser than. No, you're submitting to an authority, to a natural born leader. Men, at least men, should be natural born leaders nowadays. As I look at men nowadays, and I'm like, the red pill movement. I understand you're talking a lot about women, and a lot of, again, the red pill movement get a lot of the diagnosis correct. The prognosis is wrong, but I also want to say that, well, you guys aren't that impressive either. So I'm like, we should have more men that are natural born leaders. Now, submitting to a man that is a natural born leader who wants good for both. They want want good for the family, which is the basic building block of society. One of the most hateful things in my heart is towards those people who have lied to both sexes, saying that no, you shouldn't start a family. Men, you should go out and make money. Which, of course, yeah, go out and make money, but to start a family. While
Right. Right.
the red pill movement, they don't say that. They say make a lot of money and you'll get the BITCHESs in your without the E in your DMs. That's basically what you'll be getting. And I'm like, what? No. First of all, I reject the language. Although certain people it's quite fitting, but I reject the language. First of all, I mean if that's your attitude towards women, although certain women, I would say, yeah, that's a good description. But if that's your attitude towards women in general, I would say you have to reform yourself because you're not a natural born leader. You're just in a grievance session with your fellow losers, and you might be
Right.
making a lot of money, which good. I hope all of the red pill people, I hope they're making a lot of money. I wish them the best, but I also wish that they would see the value in family, that they would take that money and create a family, because that is the most important thing. I say to the red pill people all the time, none of the virtues that you are espousing is wrong. Yes, you should work out. Yes, you should get the muscles. Yes, you should make money. Yes, you should get popular. You should get famous. You should get a network. Yes, you should do all those things. But that all of those things is in order to protect your family, to create a family. All of that is secondary to the most important thing. The end goal is not the fame. The fame is an important part of it, but the end goal is the family. So that's why I have a huge hatred towards those who have rejected and said that, no, you don't need a family. You've taken away purpose from people's lives. You know how much despair, depression, and suicide you have done? You know how much damage has been done? That's why I have a deep hatred towards those people who are espousing those kinds of nonsense. So you obviously have created a family, which is, I mean, I just find beauty in motherhood. It's by the way, I find beauty in fatherhood. Both of them is a very important aspect of this conversation. But nowadays, what is particularly being attacked is motherhood. Both of them, but particularly motherhood, when it comes to the subject of abortion, it comes to the subject of promiscuity, and it comes to the subject of submitting. And again, going back to submitting, I just want to say that submitting does not mean you're lesser than. But just because you submit doesn't mean you are lesser than. None of it. It's not. Those people are creating a connection between those two. It's not. There's no connection there. Absolutely no connection. You, as an independent individual, make the choice. I want to submit. I want this because this will make me happy. And guess freaking what? It works for all those people. Now, some people might say, "Well, it doesn't work for me." Okay, whatever floats your boat. Find somebody where you're more independent. No problem. You're starting a family. Good. I say more power to you. If you start a family and it works, I say fine. Don't completely submit. Fine, but just start a family, please. Just start a family and do not get divorced and have some kids, please. I mean, just that is like the base minimum that I'm asking. You don't want to submit completely? Fine. For some people it works. For some people it doesn't. Fine. Whatever floats your boat. But please start a family and have kids. That's one of the most important things. So I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see that actually you have done that. And let me ask you, how is it? How is it actually having a family go? I mean, first of all, I want to ask this question in two aspects. First of all, you as a mother, how does it feel? And how does it feel for the father to come home and see three beautiful children?
Okay, so let me, on the topic of still, if I can say this, on submission, you touched on an important aspect, which is it's a choice. I mean, my husband doesn't tell me you must submit. That's not submission. That's like overpowering, and that's like being a dictator, and so that can't happen. Submission is a choice, and everybody submits their will to some sort of authority all day long. The fact that we don't go out and kill and rape each other is our submission to the laws and to authority in that sense. And I'm sorry, my child just came in here, and so let me answering your question of how does it feel to be a mom. I was just talking today to somebody about how they had said, oh, can you imagine the things you would have done if you had still been at work and if you had followed a career, where you would be now, like the success you would have. And I thought for a second, I was like, well, none of that matters. Like, I have I have my children, and I'm happy at home, and nothing could come close to that. Like, who cares about a job and making money in a career when I have to put my children at the care of somebody else? Like, I love them more than anything in the world, and there's no other place I should be except for at home with my children. Like, I can you imagine, like, I look at them and I love them so much. Where else would I be? Where else would I want to be besides, like, next to the people I care about the most?
Let me add
What would
something. Let me add just something. I saw a meme about this, and maybe if I find it, I'll send it to you so you can post it. And I think you will. I'm sure you will, because this meme is basically, it has a waitress makes $15 an hour, a businesswoman makes $400 an hour, a CEO makes about, I don't know, maybe 5 million a year, and then motherhood priceless. And I was like, yes, that is what I'm talking about.
Yes, that is a great meme. It is priceless. It very much is. I mean, I get to see all the firsts, all the walks, all the words, all the things. Like, they know me, they trust me, they see me every day, um, and that just creates security and stableness in a child's life that nothing else can buy or can pay for. I remember as a child when my I was like, I have a memory from 3 years old because it was so traumatizing of my mom putting me in daycare when I all I wanted was to be at home with her. That's all I wanted. And that's all children want, is to be at home with their moms. It's so confusing for them. And I it would when had my first child, I remember just looking at her thinking, I cannot imagine at 6 weeks old having to leave you at the care of somebody else. Like, I do not trust anybody in the world to take care of you. So I feel for these moms because they know they don't, deep down, and they're hurting, they are confused, they are in pain, and it's so sad to watch because their babies need them and they need their babies. It's not just one way street, it's a two-way street. They need each other, and it's so heartbreaking. And moms will say, oh, I'm fine, I get used to it. And this is what happens with promiscuity in that aspect, where women are like, oh, I'm fine. It's You've done it so many times, you've become desensitized to it that you don't even realize the damage it's done, but the damage is still there, very much.
That is great. So the question now, I want to go to the second part of the question. How does it make, and you can also divide this into two. First, how does it make you feel to see your husband come home and to see three beautiful children? And how does your husband feel about it? I'm sure you have probably have discussions about these kinds of things. So how does it make you feel to see a happy husband, and how does your husband feel?
Oh, we all look forward to him coming home. Like, the kids get excited. Our oldest wants to run outside, and she runs to him to get in the car. And it's it's nice. I know this man is out there working hard every day to provide for us a house and a home and security. And that's what I mean. Poor guy. I'm not always the nicest as there should be to welcome him into, but that's just how I am. Uh, I'm sometimes a little bit of a not so loving wife as I should be. But I know he's excited to come home every day. That he'll call me, he'll text me and say he misses us, and I know that if he could just work from home, he would. And we wish we could do that because I truly believe that's how it was back in the old days. Like, men would work from home somehow and just be around their families, and their children would be around their fathers and their mothers, and that's how it should be, for them to get both aspects, especially the boys. Like, our boys, they need their father around a lot, and it's sad that he has to go to work, every day 8 hours, sometimes more. So I wish he could stay home, and I know that's where he wants to be too. That's what he looks forward to every day, is coming home to us.
Does it ever make you, do you ever feel like you might be missing out on something? Maybe there's something, you know, I'm happy with this, but maybe some spice. Maybe if I were some kind of CEO and also a mother, but some kind of CEO, maybe that would have like completed everything. Or like, is this, what, this is how it is. This is just perfect. I don't need anything else.
I don't need anything else, but in my flesh, in my sinfulness, of course, especially because I wanted to go into healthcare, and and ultimately med school. And I had a lot of ambitions in that. And I have friends that I love that are close to me. One of them is a nurse, for example, and she just got into her master's program, and I'm thinking like, oh man, I wish I could do that too. But I have to ground myself and be like, why am I thinking this way? Why am I not grateful for what I have? I have the most important job in the world, but that's just my flesh and my old way of thinking just rising up. But I don't ever wake up in the morning wishing I was anywhere else besides where I am, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes so much sense. Think about it this way: when a person dies, what will be what would be at their gravestone? The money? No, the money is not. The money is probably going to be sent off, probably to the government or to
Right,
some kind of trust fund. You know who's going to be standing right above the gravestone? The children and the grandchildren, and hopefully the grandchildren. Those are the
right.
people who's going to be standing there. So
I don't
you're
think,
instead of creating a company, you're creating a legacy, which is much
right.
more important.
Exactly. I don't think anybody dies wishing they had worked more, filed more paperwork, done one more case, like seen one more patient, but they die wishing they had spent more time with their children and their family and their loved ones. So it's like the choice is obvious. It's painfully obvious. And yet, years and decades of this propaganda against women have diluted their minds so much. This is why like women react so strongly to the stuff I post, because it's so against everything we've been force fed for so long that it makes them angry because they've been
And
lied to and they know deep down, and that's why they react the way they do.
And by the way, let me also say this about the current climate, that I'm not saying no woman shouldn't go into some kind of business or art school or whatever, create something and then get married. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you will ultimately find actual happiness, real happiness within marriage, within having children. So if your goal as a woman, you see, wait a minute, this economy is terrible. Maybe I should start, working a bit, making some money. Now I have some money on my own, and use that also to find a husband. I'm like, sure, more power to you. Because again, the ultimate goal is what I'm aiming at is for men and women, get married, have children. And if starting a career, that is what gets you there. More power to you. Whatever gets you to that end goal, I say do it. But if you're going to say that I reject that all completely, I'm going to accept feminism and say that I need to be filing, as you said, more and more paperwork. That is going to make me fulfill my life. More and more bills to the IRS, more and more bills to a government that doesn't even like you. I mean, if that is what you're going to accept, I say, please don't do it. Please don't do it. You're not going to find happiness. And again, I'm sure that there are some people who are actual workaholics, and they actually do find some kind of, pleasure out of it. We're not
Right.
talking about that. That is the exception to the rule. We're not talking about exceptions. So this is what I don't like about a lot of conversations that we're having nowadays. People are always
Yes.
pointing, what about the exception? I'm like,
It's
if it doesn't
exhausting.
apply, if it does not apply, then let it fly. We're talking about specifically what the vast majority of people, and this is how it has been for thousands, hundreds of years. This is how it has been, and it worked out pretty fine. I mean, we didn't get here out of nowhere. This is how it has been, and now, and only within the last 100 years, we've gotten this new ideology that now that women need, in order to liberate oneself, and this is all completely liberal, because let me just get a little bit into this. What does liberal mean? A liberal is somebody who wants to liberate oneself from the self, liberate oneself from God. That is what liberal is. Why?
Right.
Because we already have conservative liberal ideas, such as freedom of speech, a right to defend oneself, and a whole bunch of others. And then there are stuff that is not even written in the Constitution. They are just a given, rights, privacy, and so on and so forth. Some privacy is within the Constitution, but there's greater aspects to this. These are like fundamental rights that we made sure that the government can't do. But then there are other rights that is not even in the Constitution, but you still have them. What a liberal rejects the idea of a conserving certain rights, and they say that we reject all of that. We want to liberate ourselves from those rights because we are much more than that. It is basically what the serpent whispered in the ear of Eve in the Garden of Eden. Ye shall be as gods. You will be
Right.
able to decide what is right and wrong. You will liberate yourself from God and from the flesh and blood. You will become yourself. You will become a God in and of itself. That is what it is. You will be able to decide what is right and wrong. That is the core belief in liberalism. And that goes, and I know it's so overplayed, communism, because nowadays conservatives shout communism at literally everything, the same way liberals use the word racism, conservatives use the word communism. But I'm just going to use this in a more professional term, that is also what communism espouses. It's the never-ending revolution. It's the constant criticism of everything that exists. There are certain other quotes from Karl Marx. I can't remember everything, but there are like two other quotes that I really like. I can't remember it right now, which also plays into this, that it is the liberating of oneself and try. You'll never actually become a god, but it is the liberating of oneself in order to become a god, and that ultimately leads you to commit all kinds of atrocities. And one of those atrocities, I would say, is despair, because people will ultimately never reach utopia or become a god. So when they have unattainable goals, they will never reach it. Despair is the only thing that makes itself known. It manifests itself before your eyes, before you even know it. So this is a very important subject when it comes to feminism. That feminism is that you can liberate yourself. You're not going to submit. You're going to liberate yourself from the oppressive man. I mean, how many men have died and have built this society only to make it easier for women? When it comes to feminism, this is one of the greatest criticisms of feminism. Feminism doesn't seek to create anything new. Feminism doesn't create anything new. It only takes the best parts of what men built and says, oh, by the way, now we want equal pay. By the way, we want this. Hey, who built the society? You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything.
Right.
We did this. I mean, not me. I'm not that an impressive person, but men built this. So when you think of yourself better than, oh, well, I'm going to create my own society, you're not creating anything. You're stealing what men built and claiming it as your own, and then demanding equal pay. This is something that really bothers me when it comes to feminism. You didn't create anything. Please get off your high horse. We want to be equal. We want you to be dependent on us as we want to be dependent on you, because that is what ultimately builds the best families. So let's continue on with this. This brings me next. Yes, go
Sorry,
ahead.
if I could say
Obviously,
something.
yes, I wanted to talk. Yes.
I ultimately think that feminism is not. It says that it's about liberating women from men, but ultimately it is about liberating women from having to be women, and this is why it makes them so miserable. Because the standard is they look at around and they say, "Ooh, men build buildings, societies. They keep the infrastructure. They're able-bodied to work hard. They're able to construct and build all of this, and that is the standard." They're in their heads. They look around and they say, "Ooh, this is what's good. This is what women should. This is the standard of what everybody should be." But they're wrong, because trying to get a fish to fly is an impossible thing. The same way trying to get a woman to act and be like a man is an impossible thing, and that is one of the most basic lies of feminism, is saying that you, a woman, can be like a man. You sort of like when Satan told Eve, "You shall be as God. You shall be as a man." Now is the new lie. And this is why women are so depressed and miserable, because the standard is not womanhood. The standard is manhood. And women can never be like man. And they've fallen into the lie that man is the standard of good and what they should achieve, when in reality, women build just as much important things as men do. They're just different things. Women keep their homes. They turn a house into a home. They take care of, who takes care of men? Why would men want to work so much? Who are they trying to work for? Men built societies, empires, infrastructure for women. For women. Women want to say they don't have power. That is literally the ultimate power, of having men be so in love and so want to protect and provide so much that they literally build everything. Men could live under a bridge and be happy. This is what women do not get, but they don't do it because they know women don't like that. So they want to provide and protect and give women what they want and need. And this, women have lost so much of their power because they have convinced themselves that the only way to have power as a woman is to be a man. And they will never do that, because women are not men.
Exactly. And it goes both ways. You would think from all the
Exactly.
chemicals that the government is pouring into the waters, all the estrogen, You would think that they might, from one point or another, start putting in some testosterone into the water, because it goes both ways. They're trying to masculinize men and masculinize women and feminize men, and
And that's
this
what
is
you
in
see
part,
happening.
yes, this is in part what I've alluded to earlier, that I see men nowadays. I'm like, listen, I mean, you gotta do better. Now I know what the answer to from the red pill movement would be. It's that it's not fair. It's not fair. I mean, look at all the participation trophies women get, and when I say participation trophies, I mean the promotions, the better pay, the job, all of the other things. Women are getting all these things unjustifiably. So it's not fair. I say, yes, you're correct. It's not fair. And guess what? That is what men do. They take on
Yes,
unfair challenges and they
absolutely.
grow above it. And by the way, here's another thing that might trigger a lot of people. I've already said this in a previous episode, but I'm still going to repeat it once more, that I do not, my metric for justice is not fairness. I don't care if things are fair or not, because this world is not fair. But I do care for justice. Because why do I don't use fairness as a metric? Because you know what fairness would be? If somebody were to kill somebody, fairness would dictate that any person from that family who has had that tragedy would be allowed to kill the murderer in the first place. That's And we've lost. Okay. All right, we're back. What
Sorry.
happened?
I don't know. Are you...
No problem. No problem. Let me just continue on where we were.
Yes. Sorry.
From where we were. So fairness would dictate that the family who has suffered the tragedy that somebody killed their family member, fairness would dictate you can now go and kill that person. I would say no, that is fairness, but it's not justified, because we need a court of law. We need justice. Justice would dictate that, no, I know, he killed your family, but now we're going to go through a process. We're going to make sure that this is actually what happened. Now that is justice. Fairness, again, you know what else fairness would dictate? That if somebody rapes somebody, then anybody else could rape that person, because
Right.
that's fairness. I'm saying, no, that's not good. Fairness is not good. Fairness
I agree.
is a terrible metric. Justice, that is the metric I'm looking at. So when it comes to the red pill movement, it comes to men who are not even red pilled, but they're like, well, it's not fair. I'm like, I know it's not fair. You're correct. I completely agree with you. I understand you. Hell, I'm a man. I know what's going on. I've seen stories. I've seen what's going on. And there are so many times that it eats away at my soul from seeing so many bad stories that I've seen. But it doesn't matter. As a man, you have to go above the fray. I don't care. It's unfair. Rise to the challenge and conquer it. So this is my message to the red pill movement. I know it's not fair. You have to conquer it. That's your challenge. You say you're so powerful. You say you're doing exercise. You say you're making a lot of money. Now put it to use. Let me see you do something productive with it, instead of complaining about women all the time, which is, of course, criticizing women. Sure, you can criticize women. Of course, I encourage it. I encourage criticizing men. I encourage criticism from all sides, productive criticism, but criticism nonetheless. But if it's only going to be criticism and nothing productive comes out of it, then just shut up. You're not doing anything. You're not helping anybody. Please create a family. Again, I'm going to repeat this over and over again, because that is the most important thing. The basic building block of society, the most important unit, is the family. Libertarians say it's the individual. Liberals say it's the collective. I say, as a conservative, it's a combination of both. It is the family, because that's an individual collective. It's a collective of people, but it's headed by an individual. And that is the most important building block of society. So let's continue on from this. I feel like I'm on a roll here. Let's go. So you've rejected all of that. You have embraced a more traditional lifestyle. Now, the reason why I have you on is not only that you've become a wife, because there are a lot of wives out there. The reason I'm bringing you on is because you become a housewife. You become traditional. You've taken on a traditional role, which has been missing from the society for a long time. What does it mean to be traditional?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, I say all the time, traditionalism without Christianity is dead. You cannot have one without the other. Tradition comes from the Word of
I would say
God.
religion. I would just say Judeo-Christian religion as a whole. I would say
Sure.
that.
And so tradition, it comes from, for me, it comes from, and what I think is true, it comes from the Word of God, and um, all that He claims that is good for us, um, and all that He wants us to follow is good. So, would you like specifically things that I think are traditional, like
Yes. What separates?
traditionally?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. What separates you as a traditional housewife from any other wife? What makes it more appealing to be traditional?
Well, I let's see. Any other wife? Well, since I ground my beliefs in what I think God tells us to be, I would say that um, I keep my home first. So I look at the needs of my house first. I um, I try to build my house up instead of plugging it down. I I try to tell my children every day about the word and give them, biblical lessons. I try to be a pleasant and kind and submit to my husband's authority and try to have a peaceful, joyful home. Um, Essentially, what comes first is the well-being and the keeping of my home, instead of thinking of myself first and my needs. Essentially, the traditional wife lifestyle, the Christian lifestyle of a wife, should be serving others before ourselves. That's the life of a Christian, essentially. But me as a wife, my job should be to look after the needs of everybody that's in my care, because my children are in my care, but my husband is also, I also take care of my husband. If that makes, it's not just him taking care of me, I take care of him. And I think that's essentially the difference is from, like, just these are things women aren't taught, like just be a wife. And people go into marriage just still very individualistic in their thought and still looking out for number one, which is themselves, instead of the marriage. Because more important than me is our marriage, if that makes sense. Because we have children now, and our marriage is more important than just us, just me as an individual, him as an individual. So I think that's the number one difference is the thought and the heart of a servant versus of being served. The focus of taking care of your home, and the focus of, most of all, being pleasing to God and following His word. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course it does. So, what? But the most important thing that we have been discussing about is that this actually brings you happiness. It brings specifically to you, but I would say in a general sense, if women were just open to the idea instead of just accept the narrative as is given, spoon-fed to them since they're a baby, that they need to be so-called independent, they need to be boss babing around, they need to be promiscuous, which is another thing. Let's talk about the promiscuity problem. My problem, first of all, of course, as a religious person, I've already. We don't really need to discuss the problems of promiscuity from a religious point of view, and even from a natural point of view. But just how about from a common sense point of view? I want to ask, why would promiscuity be part of the feminist movement? The first feminist movement wasn't so. Again, I reject all feminist movements from the first to the last, and I'm sure there are going to be more. But the first one didn't, out of the box, first call for promiscuity. So,
Well,
what, as a former feminist, what made you think that promiscuity? What's the argument? I'm trying to figure out what is the argument about promiscuity.
well, the first movement, the feminists, if you read what they wrote and what they ultimately wanted, was sexual liberation from the very beginning. Um, they wanted women to have sex like men and to not suffer the consequences of sex like men do, hence abortion and birth control. So this has been at the very forefront, even in the early feminists. Um, but why do I think women believe the lie? Well, it's just years of this, of women being told constantly that women can engage in sexual and any sexual behavior like men. Like I said before, the goal is to always be like men, to always engage in things in ways that men do. And women, I know I was convinced of this lie that sex is just something natural and you can just have it, you can just do it with anybody. that you like and anybody you want, and there's no consequences to it. Like, it's just a thing. It's normal. If you like somebody, you have sex with them, and there's like, that's fine. If you believed otherwise that you shouldn't, then you're just a prude. And this is the narrative that's constantly pushes is sex is okay, it's natural, you should have it with whoever, and that there's no consequences to it, like emotional. And because here's the thing, this also I hadn't realized this, but in the feminist movement and the liberal movement, there is they separate the body from the soul. They think it's two separate things. Like, if it's not causing a harm to the body, then then it's fine. It won't cause harm to anything. But us Christians believe that body, soul, and mind are all one thing. So if you cause harm to your body, you are causing harm to your soul and your mind. But if you cause harm to your soul, you're causing harm to all the other things. You're not just a sack of meat. This is why evolution is also like such a slippery slope, because it's just, we're just, in that worldview, you're just a creation of like a random chance. So why would it matter? Why would it matter if you engaged in like sex, in any amount of sex with anybody you want, with anybody on the street, when it's literally, you're just matter, just stardust, just randomly. There's nothing else to it. So why would it cause you harm in a sense that isn't physical, in the metaphysical sense? So I believe this, but deep down, every time I engaged in that behavior, and this is true for everybody that does, I do not believe what anybody tells me. Any woman that engages in this kind of behavior does feel like absolute crap about it, and knows it is wrong, and knows it deep down in her heart that that is not the way she should be acting, and it does nothing for them, absolutely nothing. And that is a hill I will die on. Women will say, oh, it's fine for me, like, you see porn stars, they're like, oh, it's fine, I don't feel any sort of way. And that's a woman that's been broken from years, and just so many times is this constant like mistreatment of mistreating themselves and being mistreated by others, that, oh, you just get to a point you're desensitized. But it is causing active harm to everybody, that men and women, but more so women, when they engage in this behavior.
You know what? I've been thinking about this, and about the promiscuity question, and the way I see it. This is now. I'm going to take a little bit from Nora Vincent. Do you know who she is, or who
I
she
do not.
was?
I do
Okay,
not.
so she was a lesbian who disguised herself as a man to expose the patriarchy and male privilege, and to show that men have it better. And she wrote a book about it. And she came back. She wanted to do it for 2 years, and she only did it for 1.5 years. And she said that it was the hardest thing in her life, and she has now a completely different point of view of the entire thing. Her book, I highly recommend it. And
Oh,
I
interesting.
this is, by the way, by the way, about feminist studies, I say this. I'm not against feminist studies, but I only want one book to be taught, and that is Self-Made Man by Nora Vincent. That's the only book that feminist studies should be teaching the women, because you'll find out so much more about feminine psychology, masculine psychology. You'll find out so much more about just reading this book than anything else. This will answer a lot of questions that women have, and this will also give an appreciation for men. And by the way, I'm not saying this only women should read it. I'm saying men should read it as well. By the way, I still can't believe Hollywood hasn't made a movie about this. Hollywood is looking for something original. I'm like, here's something original. You got to make a movie out of this. I highly recommend you read it. I'm telling you, if you're going to read this, you're going to come away with so much information. It's gonna open your eyes to so much of the differences between men and women.
No,
Because
I'm definitely gonna get it and read it.
she went undercover. I haven't even finished the book yet. I'm still reading it, and
Okay.
I must say it's amazing. It's a superb job. And why I said who she was, because unfortunately she committed suicide, in assisted suicide. Just, it's not as gruesome, but in a way it is. But not,
Right.
it's
I
in a
had
way
a
it is more
feeling.
gruesome. It's more gruesome in a way because it's doctors committing it,
Right.
because that's a perversion. But it's not as physically not as gruesome. So yeah, so that is on that. But she she had some problems, and one of my regrets in life is that I never actually got to meet her. I would have loved to meet her because she really exposes a lot into the psychology, because she actually lived it. Not those people who are like, one day in the life as a man. No, she lived like a man for about almost 2 years, and the things she found out is amazing. Anyway, and by the way, there are some things that I'm like, when she describes it, I'm like, I know exactly what she's talking about. At some point, she talks about man handshake versus women hugging. It's so she said that every time she met with her girlfriends, it's so fake. The hugging, it doesn't mean anything. But one handshake with a man, it was so real. It was that she was welcomed into the club. She was part of it. It was no turning back. It was a real firm handshake. And I was like, I know exactly what she's talking about. I know exactly that handshake. I have had that handshake with multiple men, and every time I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. It's a very vivid, it's very detailed, very well put together. I highly recommend it. Anyway, so let me quote what she said. She said that when it comes to sex, for men, it's more natural, but for women, it is emotional. It is mental.
Right.
So
Yes.
then when you have promiscuity, this is the most important thing. When you have promiscuity in women and men, it is more detrimental to women. Here's why. Because promiscuity, first of all, is bad for the soul, period. So both sides suffer. But guess what? For men, it doesn't have that much an effect on the body. But for women, it does have. It has an effect on the it's all the physical body in certain aspects, but more importantly, what it has an effect on is the mind, because it's emotional, it is mental, and that is why for men it's less. It's a little bit less. I'm saying don't do it because it tarnishes the soul, but for women it is worse. So the question is, why peddle such a lie, and why even buy into it? And this is what I'm thinking. It's because women want to feel desired, and being promiscuous gives you a little bit of that. I mean, the thirst traps where they pose half naked,
Yes.
and they get all the likes. It's like it's a dopamine hit. They are like,
yes,
yeah, I'm desired. I'm like, first, above all else, I just want to say this: you don't actually have to do that. You don't have to show half naked. There are beautiful, beautiful women who have this vintage look. They put on the vintage kind of clothes, and I'm like, first of all, they look way better than anybody from any of the promiscuous women. That's first of all. Above all else, they look much better. Objectively speaking, they look much better. You don't have to do that, and they feel just as desired.
Yes.
But what it feels like is, oh, look at all these men. They want me. Yes, they want you, but they don't want you. They want to use that body and discard it the moment they're done with it. That's all they want. They don't want you. They don't want you as an individual. They don't want you to start a family. Why? Because, first of all, in part, that's a lot how men think. It's one of the vices of men. See, I can also attack men. For those who say that I'm attacking women too much, I can also attack men. And hell, there's a lot to attack. But the desire is fake. The desire is only on the body. It has nothing to do with you as a person. So the promiscuity, it has to stop. The half naked stuff, it has to half naked. Completely, it has. I would say, if you want, it's kind of hard to get rid of it once you get that dopamine rush from Instagram. It's kind of hard to get rid of it. So I'm saying you don't have to start at cold turkey. What you could do is, first, above all else, post modest photos. Find those vintage clothing. I'm telling you, it just looks great. The vintage clothing looks great. I posted from some huge influencer on Instagram, and I said, women, what is stopping you from dressing like this? And there is not even one person in their right mind who would say that she's oppressed. She's wearing beautiful clothes. There's not one person in their right mind would say, oh, these clothes are oppressive. No, they're not. She looks amazing and stunning, but she also looks modest. That's what I'm asking for. So I would say, personally, what I would say is just, don't post on Instagram. Just don't. But if that is too hard, start with something. I'm telling you, you'll find that same dopamine rush. You'll feel that same desire, but also you won't be denigrating not your soul, not your body. You'll be a complete person. You'll be your own individual. And do you really want, because the internet is forever. I mean, maybe with AI and this new government regulation, it may not be, but do you really want your photos to be out there forever? Because once you go there, you can't turn it back. once there is no turning it back, and you might regret this, because there are people who are downloading those videos, downloading those photos, and now it's on their private computer, and you can do nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop them.
Right.
It's terrible, and I'm just it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see people falling for the feminist lies. May I say, people are falling for the feminist thirst trap. It is degenerate, and it is promiscuous in the worst ways possible. But I'm glad I'm glad to know that you've rejected that. You have found happiness, much something that's missing from this world, just within the society, but a lot of it from this world. So let's continue on. I mean, how long can you still go on? Do you want to go another 20 minutes?
Sure. Like I can 10, 15, if that's all right.
Okay. All right. If something comes up, just let me know, and
Yes.
we'll wrap it up. All right. So the next question is about the red pill movement, because, as I said, we were going to get into this. What would you say, as a traditional wife? What would you say to the red pill movement? Or like, yeah, your husband is lucky, but I can't find anybody like that. I can't find anybody like you. It's not fair. So what would you say to them to help them in their need? Because you, as a woman, you should have an interesting perspective, because a lot of them, they're listening to Andrew Tate, they're listening to other red pill people, and they're not ever getting or Pearl, who's, she brings up a lot of good points, but and a lot of points is just trash. So you, as a traditional person, what would you say to the people who are so-called red pilled?
I mean, they would never date or marry a woman like me, which is funny because they'll say your husband is just like you, but then they would throw a woman like me out the door automatically, according to their standards. Because I used to be a feminist. I did not wait until marriage. Whatever. I used to be a feminist, like I get called all sorts of names by the red pill men, and so does my husband because he married me. And essentially, red pill and feminism are just the same. It's just the religion of complaint. Honestly, it's just wanting to complain about what is happening and not offer actual solutions. And feminism is about just anything, blaming everything on men, and the red pill is just about blaming everything on women. And it's just Satan's way of pinning women and men against each other constantly. And I can't get behind any sort of belief that's constantly pinning men and women against each other. Because ultimately, I think, like you say, that the nuclear family is essential to any functioning society, is essential to any moral society. And until you stop pinning women and men against each other and start working on ways to bring men and women back together and realize that, literally God said it was not good for men to be alone. Men was not made to be alone. Men was made to need a woman. A woman is made for her husband to fit his needs, to fit the mission that God has for him. My qualities, my the things that I can do, the ways that I am fit my husband and his needs in his mission. I was made to help him, and him without me would not be good. God literally said so. And who can say anything against God? Nobody. God is the ultimate standard of truth, and he says it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a help meet, as a woman is suited to fit the man's need. And until men and women stop complaining about their situations and start taking charge, especially men, start taking charge of and responsibility for the state of their life and the state of affairs, then this would just be again another ideology of constant complaints, like feminism.
Right. But again, I would like to know what would be for as you said, they would throw away a woman like yourself in a heartbeat, because their compass is completely discombobulated.
The women they want do not want them. A woman that is a virgin, that is a Christian, does not want a man that's a red pill. most of the time these men aren't Christians, and they're willing to have sex outside of marriage. The women they want do not want men like them. They want traditional women without being traditional themselves. They'll just sit around and
Right.
complain that, oh, but churches are just a bunch of women that are lying, that are all reformed whores that actually aren't like actually truthful. But it's like, it sounds like all you guys are going to these modern churches that aren't actually like truly Christian Bible believing churches. Like, get yourself involved in an actual church that isn't this modern like mega churches. Go to a church and be yourself, what you want to find in someone else. It's the women that they want. Like, I know women at my church. All these single, waiting until marriage, moral, chaste, meek women would never want to date or marry a man that's constantly complaining about women, that has this bad attitude about marriage, and that treats other women this way, like just calling them whores or whatever else. A woman like that would not want a man like that. That is just a fact.
Exactly. This is what we discussed earlier in the conversation, that if your attitude towards women is going to be that you're going to call them bitches or whores. The reason why I'm not saying the words, because I don't like swearing. I've said the words in the past, of course, but I just don't generally. I don't like swearing anyway. So if you're going to call them all these kinds of words, I mean, how do you actually expect to find a woman that is not that? Because you generally think of all women as being that. I have no problem with you describing somebody who's acting in such a way as that. I have no problem with that. You're accurately describing that person.
Right.
Call them out on it. I would say call them out, shame them. But if you're going to call all women like this, I'm like, you're not gonna find anybody. Nobody's gonna want to date you.
Right.
I mean, you could have all the money in the world. You know what? You could have all the money in the world. Women who are actually traditional are not going to date you, because there are enough traditional guys who are not making that much money, but they are actually loving, and they will find each other. You're just going to be left out. You'll have all the money in the world. Well, guess what? As you said, I kind of disagree with the equation of feminism, because I think feminism is actually more evil than red pill. But you are correct in that there's a lot of similarities, not least of which is that the red pill tells you that you should both tell you that you shouldn't have a family. You should both tell you should chase a career.
Yes.
And I'm like,
and
yes, that is. Go ahead.
And to make yourself infertile, like you should, like not be able to have children, get a vasectomy, take birth control. Like, both of them push that.
Exactly. So both of them destroy marriages or never create marriages in the first place.
Right.
And they are the destruction of families. So yes, I would say that they are both of them. What would they lead you to? Both of them would lead you, instead of being the single woman with 552,892 cats in her house, you'll be the single man with $585,982 in your bank account. But guess what? You would still not find love. You will not find somebody to take care of you. You'll be all alone. Yes, you'll go to the fancy parties. Yes, you'll go and have all the fame and all the stuff. And if that floats your boat and you're not interested, okay, well, I mean, it's a sad. I mean, personally, I think it's sad. But if that is actually what floats your boat and you're not interested, there's exceptions to everything. But if you're actually interested, you want a woman, but you're like, yeah, I can't find a woman. No, it's not that you can't find a woman. For all the masculinity talk, for all the tough guy talk, for somebody such as yourself, you say that you're going to do all the exercise, you're going to make a lot of money, you're so powerful, wow, I can't believe you would be such a failure that you wouldn't be able to do something as simple as to find a woman that cares, especially since that woman would be in a church. Now, of course, we're not talking about a LGBTQ plus or whatever church. We're talking about like an actual church that actually believes in a moral order. We're not talking about the fake hijacked churches. We're talking about the real church. Just go into one, and I'm telling you, you will find somebody. Or if you don't find them immediately, go from church to church. Find them. Find the person that is perfect for you. And I'm telling you, if you want to be traditional, you're not going to sleep around. Don't sleep around. I know it's more natural, and this is something that a lot of the women who don't understand this. Yes, it's more natural for men to sleep around. And guess what? That doesn't mean it's okay or you should do it. It means that this is the vice you have. You, as a man, you have a vice. You want to sleep around. You have to fight against it constantly. It's just as simple as that. It's okay to have these natural urges, but what you got to do is fight against it. That's literally your battle. That's literally what you've been put down on this world to do. Fight against it. For all to talk about, again, for all to talk about, you're going to be so powerful. Why can't you control this one thing? I think there was this one video. What's the famous? I think he's a red pill guy. He's very close with Andrew Tate. He's also a millionaire.
Fit, guys.
No, he is the guy with the open shirt and open Waller, Justin Waller, I think. I think that's his name. If not, if that is not his name, I apologize to random Justin Waller. I apologize, but I think that's his name. This guy was asked by Lila Rose, who's from the pro-life movement, asked the question.
I know which guy you're talking about. I don't know his name. I know which one.
So she asked him, since you're such a powerful man, that you think that you can curb your desires? I mean, you're so powerful. You should be able to, and said, no, I don't do that kind of thing. Then she asked him, and you also said that you're not, not in literal words, but you could have seen that that's the subtext, that you're saying that you're not a limited person and you're in control. Wouldn't you say that you saying that you're not going to do it and that you can't stop it? That's a little bit limited of yourself. And he got really mad at that one. He was upset about it, and of course he waved it away like, oh yeah, this macho guy, he's in control of his emotions. But everybody who watched that video was able to say, okay, he lost his cool there. Right. Yes, of course he wasn't outraged. He didn't start crying like a baby, which I commend him, of course. If you're going to handle a situation like that, you should compose yourself. Don't act like a child. But everybody could see that his demeanor changed, and he was upset about it. I don't think he snipped back. I don't remember what he said back, but everybody knew. No, she got you. You say that you're in control. You clearly are not in control about this one thing. About all the other aspects in your life, you probably are in control. But this one thing, you're not in control, and you're closed-minded. You're not open-minded to this one thing, that you are going to control your destiny. You're going to find a wife that is meant for you. So if this is the people that the Red Pill movement are looking up to, I'm like, you gotta find better role models. Again, a lot of these people, such as Andrew Tate and Waller, they say a lot of good things. I know Andrew Tate. From a lot of people from the traditional side, we're not allowed to praise Andrew Tate. I'm like, this guy says a lot of good things. He says a lot of bad things.
He says a lot of grievances are correct. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that is just obvious. Nobody's disagreeing.
Exactly.
I disagree.
He says good things. He says good things, bad things, but again, you got to take it on a case-by-case basis. And by the way, by not acknowledging the Red Pill movement, their grievances, this is from the traditional side, from those because the traditional side is now militarized in a way, much less, maybe militarized is a little too harsh, but I'm just going to use this word for simplicity's sake, that they're militarized against the Red Pill, and they constantly make fun of the Red Pill, meanwhile the Red Pill make fun of the traditional people. I'm like, listen, traditionalists, you're correct, you're right. Now, but by just being right, you're not going to get anybody from the Red Pill movement over to your side. What you got to do is you got to acknowledge their grievances and have a normal conversation with them, talk with them, because that's how you're going to bring them over. If you just alienate them, they're just going to retreat in their shell, and they're not gonna come out of their mom's basement for all the funniness about being an independent man. I still find it funny that some of them still live in their mom's basement. So that is something that we could actually talk about if you really want to be independent of women. But again, let's go back. We're gonna be wrapping this up now. Let's go back to where we started this conversation. That men and women should be dependent on one another in different aspects, in different ways, and in different categories, and to different degrees. But nonetheless, the word dependent comes to mind. Independent of government, but dependent on one another. Would you say that would be the most beautiful thing? Because that's how it used to be. Again, and by the way, I just want to finish with this. As you mentioned, that God created Eve, and I want to add to this. Why did God create Eve? Because Adam was lonely, which goes to show that for human nature, God isn't enough, because for the human spirit, God is enough. But we're also flesh and blood. So God created one another because our human nature, our flesh and bones, wouldn't be able to sustain itself without God. That's why we have one another. God said, here you go. This is something for you to be able to find sustenance. Otherwise, you'll just fall into despair. So
Right, and it's
for
also a way to represent God's both sides. Like, good qualities of women are also qualities that God has. He didn't put all of those into man. He put them into women, and certain qualities of God he put into man, and that's why he needed women, and that's why we complete each other, and
exactly.
we're
Dependence. Again, I'm going to say this one more time. This is why God created women. This is why God created man, because they need to be dependent on one another. Where am I taking this from? I'm taking this from that you will become one flesh. How do you become
right,
one flesh? Because you depend on one another. Otherwise, if you're an independent person, independent from each other, then you can't become one because you're independent. But if you are
right,
dependent, you're one piece of the puzzle and there's the other piece of the puzzle.
exactly,
Now you're becoming one flesh. Now only this way. So that's why I'm using the word dependent, because this word has become a dirty word for some reason. No, we can't be
yes,
dependent on one another.
I
No, we have
agree.
to be independent. No, you're dependent upon God, and you're also dependent on the other sex. Become one flesh, become a family, become the basic building block of society, and you will forever be in God's glory. So I think this is the
Independence sucks. I have done the independent women, don't need no man, and there is nothing but loneliness and misery there. And it's just like being independent for what? What reason? Like, oh, wow, I can just depend on myself. Like, okay, are you that awful that you can't have people around you that like you and want to be in your life? Like, that's what it means. There's nothing great about not depending on anybody. We weren't made to do life alone. Nobody wants to be alone in a house all day. Dependence is good. You should depend on others. It lightens the load. It's good to depend. And it's good to have others depend on you. That's the thing. It's so fulfilling to
agreed.
to meet others' needs. People, this self-obsessed culture of the me, me, me. I need to find myself. I need to do what I want. I need to look after me. It's all about the me. And we've never been more miserable now that we're more me focused than ever before. And misery is an all-time high because happiness, joy can only come from a place of being a servant and serving others and giving up ourselves to others. That is where joy comes from. There's so much happiness in just like taking care of my children, taking care of my husband, like it more so than him doing it for me or my children doing it for me. We were made to serve and work in that fashion, and that's what I think is also missing from the message of feminism and the red pill. Is all it's about serving me, when in reality it's about serving others.
Exactly. Again, we've come first full circle from the start. As I said, we need to be dependent. It's become a dirty word, but as I will say it one more time, men and women need each other. We're created for one another. We need to
I
become one
agree.
flesh.
Yep.
Well, this has been an amazing and really enlightening conversation. I've I've heard a lot. I've learned a lot, and I'm just glad that there are certain people here. I hope these people take away whatever. I hope that as many people from the Red Pill movement listen to this, and you don't. I hope I was able to change your mind on some things. So I just hope that maybe I made you more positive. Maybe you're not completely convinced. Well, it's a start. I'm glad that we could be part of your journey to a more traditional lifestyle, if that ever happens. And God bless you all. So for those who are interested, they heard from you so much. Where they want to follow you, because as I said earlier, you post stuff on Twitter, and there's a lot of good stuff that you post. Where can they find you? What is your Twitter handle?
Oh, okay. I am on Twitter. My at is at the fem turns. But I'm pretty sure if you just turn the feminist turned housewife, you'll find me on there. That is
All right.
my name.
And for those who want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at Aaron Politidoxy on Twitter, or you could reach out to me at Aaron Friedman on Instagram. You can send an email to me on politidoxy@gmail.com. Please leave 5 stars if you're listening on if you're actually watching in a way, but if you're on Spotify, if you're watching on YouTube, Also, leave a like, share. The most important thing you can share. Well, if you want to reach the Red Pill movement, you got to share this to them. Send it to them. Send it to your friends. Send it everywhere. The most important thing, the more views, the better. And the more people, this is not about views or my popularity. This is all about helping people to navigate their way in the world, such as I am navigating myself throughout this world. So share, like, subscribe, follow, send it everywhere. I thank you very much for listening to this episode. And remember, my fellow radicals, stay political.